In a narrow alleyway not far from the Tiber River stood a crumbling palazzo wrapped in ivy and silence. The sort of place where the shutters always seemed closed, and the air smelled of dust and memory. Inside lived Alessia Marino, a quiet girl of 17 with sharp eyes and a mind full of questions no one dared to answer. Her grandmother, Nonna Vittoria, had passed just 3 weeks ago. A stern woman who never smiled, whose presence lingered even in her absence. The family home became colder, not because of the weather, but because of what came next. After the funeral, Alessia's mother, Signora Marino, gathered the family in the red drawing room. Heavy curtains sealed out the Roman sunlight. In the center of the room stood a portrait no one had seen before, an oil painting of Nonna Vittoria, larger than life, her eyes painted with unsettling accuracy. "They followed you wherever you moved. This is where she will stay now," her mother announced. "She must still witness our lives." No one spoke. Not her father, not her uncle Cesare, not her cousin Livia. They simply nodded, as if it had always been this way. From that moment on, the portrait wasn't just decoration. It dictated life in the house. Every morning, Alessia was made to greet the portrait with a kiss to the frame. If she forgot, her breakfast was taken away. At dinner, an extra plate was set beneath the painting, filled with steaming pasta or roasted lamb, which no one touched. What disturbed Alessia most wasn't the ritual. It was the way things seemed to happen in response to the painting's gaze. When Livia laughed too loud, the next morning she woke up with a fever that lasted 4 days. When Uncle Cesare left the room without bowing to the portrait, a stack of books mysteriously toppled on him that night, leaving a deep gash above his temple. Alessia started keeping a journal. She drew sketches of the portrait's subtle changes, how the mouth seemed to curl ever so slightly downward when someone disobeyed. She wrote down dates, details, fears. She tried to convince herself it was grief playing tricks on them all. But the house disagreed. One night, as thunder cracked over the Roman rooftops, she woke to the sound of whispering. Faint hissing, almost like wind through marble. She tiptoed from her room, clutching a candle, and walked barefoot across the tiled hallway. The voice was coming from the drawing room. As she reached the door, it creaked open by itself. The portrait was glowing, as if lit from within. And in the flickering candlelight, Alessia saw something she could never forget. The eyes of Nonna Vittoria blinked. Just once. The candle trembled in her hand. And before she could scream, the door slammed shut behind her. The morning after the portrait blinked, Alessia didn't speak. She moved like a ghost through the palazzo, her skin pale as the marble floor. Her mother said nothing, but Alessia saw the way she looked at her, knowingly, almost approvingly. That afternoon, the family gathered in the sunroom. It had once been filled with life, birds, potted lemons, the scent of rosemary. Now it was a museum of shadows. In the center of the room stood a small wooden table with a terracotta pot. Inside it, a single basil plant, wilting, barely alive. Alessia's aunt, Lucia, motioned toward it. "Your turn," she said quietly. Alessia stared. "My turn for what?" "To feed it." Before she could ask more, her mother pressed something cold into her hand. A silver spoon. Alessia looked at it, confused. Then she noticed the brown vial on the table. No label, no scent, just dark liquid that caught the light like ink. The others watched in silence. She dipped the spoon, fed a few drops to the plant, and waited. Nothing happened. But as dusk fell over Rome, and the bells of Trastevere chimed 7 times, Alessia returned to the sunroom. The basil was upright, greener, stronger, as if reborn. She turned to leave, but found the door shut, locked from the outside. Behind her, the basil rustled. There was no wind. She leaned in. Tiny writing had appeared on the underside of one leaf, like it had been written by a spider spinning ink. "Don't let it go dry again." For the next 5 days, Alessia returned to the plant each evening. It flourished unnaturally fast, growing thick, pungent leaves that filled the room with a smell both familiar and foreign. And each night, new words would appear on different leaves. She watches through the green. The roots remember pain. The dress was not enough. That night, Alessia opened her grandmother's old wardrobe, still filled with mothballs and forgotten lace. At the very back, folded in perfect squares, was the pink Easter dress. Alessia had worn it after Nana died. She thought it had been burned. Her mother had said so. But here it was untouched, freshly ironed. She didn't remember putting it there. And underneath the dress, wrapped in yellowed tissue, was something far stranger. A child-sized mannequin, shaped like a young girl. Its face featureless. Its arms stitched with thread. A name was written across the collarbone in ink. Alessia. The door behind her creaked open. Her mother stood there, lips pursed, eyes heavy. "You've been chosen," she said. And for the first time in her life, Alessia understood that grief in her family wasn't something you passed through. It was something you wore. There had always been one room in the house no one entered. It was just off the second-floor landing, opposite the family library. Its door was painted dark green and bore no handle, only a bronze knocker shaped like a lion's face. For years, Alessia assumed it was storage. Her mother called it La Stanza del Silenzio, the room of silence. No one spoke of it. No one questioned it. But that night, as the basil plant shimmered under the moonlight and the pink dress lay folded across her bed, the door stood open. Not ajar. Open. Alessia crept out of her bedroom, her bare feet silent against the cool floor. The house was asleep or pretending to be. She passed the portrait in the drawing room without looking at it. She couldn't bear to see if the eyes were open again. At the threshold of the green door, she paused. The air was colder here, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Inside was darkness. She stepped in. The door shut behind her. The room was circular, walls lined with mirrors. Each reflected a version of herself, some younger, some older, some wearing the dress. In the very center stood a small table, upon which lay a single item, an ornate key. It was shaped like a leaf. As she picked it up, the mirrors changed. They no longer reflected her. Instead, they showed other women, each wearing the same pink dress, each sitting at the same table, holding the same key. Some cried. Some stared blankly. One smiled. Alessia stepped back, heart-thudding. Then a voice whispered from behind her. "Do you remember your twin?" She spun around. No one. Her breath caught in her throat. She had no twin. At least, that's what she'd always been told. The mirror in front of her rippled like water, and a new reflection took shape. A girl with her face, but not her. The eyes were darker, the hair longer, the smile unfamiliar. The girl on the other side raised her hand and pressed it against the mirror. And Alessia did the same. The glass was warm. Suddenly, the walls pulsed. The mirrors flickered with candlelight, revealing more and more faces. Dozens, young women from different times, but always in the same place. The basil plant, the dress, the locked room. The key began to glow in her hand. There was a knock at the door. 3 slow taps. And a voice, gentle but firm. "It's time." Alessia stepped back from the mirror, holding the key tightly. The door opened again on its own. Light spilled in from the corridor. Her mother stood there, holding a single candle. "You've seen her, haven't you?" she asked. Alessia nodded. Her mother's eyes welled with tears, but she smiled faintly. "She's the first. She never left." Alessia wanted to ask more, but her voice refused to form words. Her mother extended her hand. "There's more you need to know. Come with me." And so, clutching the leaf-shaped key, Alessia stepped into the hallway, the room behind her vanishing as the door closed once more, this time without a sound. The candle flickered in her mother's hand as they descended into the lower corridor, an arched passage Alessia had never noticed before, hidden behind the grandfather clock in the study. Dust clung to the curved walls like ancient fingerprints, and the air smelled of limestone, rust, and something sweeter, decay, perhaps, disguised by lavender. They walked in silence. Their footsteps echoed until they reached a wrought iron gate at the bottom of a stone staircase. Her mother unlocked it with a silver key shaped like a crescent moon. Beyond it lay a narrow chamber, lined with old tiles in faded Roman patterns. Some bore images of vines and fruit. Others were plain, cracked by age. And in the center of the floor was an open square. A single tile missing. Alessia stepped forward, crouching. She ran her fingers along the edges of the empty square. There, beneath the space, was a name. Eleonora Marino. She looked up sharply. That's... Yes, her mother whispered. Your twin. Alessia's mouth went dry. She lived for 3 days, her mother continued. She never cried. Not once. Then she stopped breathing. We buried her heart beneath this tile. Alessia's hand trembled as she traced the name. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because the house did, her mother said, voice distant. When the time was right, her mother reached into her robe and removed a folded slip of parchment. On it, written in delicate, looping script, were more names. Alessia's eyes scanned them. Eleonora, Benedetta, Lucia, Julia, Isabetta. All women. All family. All with a tile. Alessia realized the pattern beneath her feet was no design. It was a map. A catalog. Each tile held a name. Each name had a story. A ritual. A role. This is where we place our grief, her mother whispered. So, it never leaves us. So it grows. She stepped over to a small wooden drawer at the base of the wall. Inside was a fresh tile, blank but for the outline of a name being etched, slowly, as if by invisible hands. Alessia. She stumbled back. No. I'm not. You've seen the girl. You've heard the leaves. The house has chosen. You must understand, her mother said, placing a hand on her shoulder. We don't mourn like others. We preserve. The candlelight dimmed. The chamber seemed to breathe. And just then, Alessia heard the sound of scratching. Faint. Rhythmic. Like a fingernail dragging across stone. It came from beneath her. She knelt again, placing her ear near the empty space. A voice, muffled, whispered her name from below. Alessia. She scrambled back, her spine against the cold wall, as her mother calmly replaced the blank tile over the opening, sealing it shut once more. Not yet, her mother said softly. First, the offering. Alessia rose, breath shaking. What offering? But her mother was already walking away, the candlelight dancing against the chamber walls. Only the echo of her footsteps remained. And beneath the tile with her sister's name, something moved. The next morning, Alessia woke to find the pink dress hanging from her wardrobe. This time it wasn't folded neatly. It was suspended, arms outstretched, as if someone had dressed an invisible figure and left it standing. The air in her room smelled different now. Stronger. The basil had become overpowering, seeping through the walls. Every breath tasted of it. Her throat burned slightly as she dressed, the fabric clinging tighter than before, like it remembered something she didn't. Her mother waited in the kitchen. No coffee. No breakfast. Only a porcelain bowl filled with soil. Come, she said. They walked in silence again, through the back of the palazzo and into the overgrown garden behind it, a walled courtyard hidden from the street, where fig trees leaned like sleeping giants and ivy crawled up rusted statues. In the center stood a raised stone altar, covered in moss. Alessia had never seen it before. Her mother placed the bowl on the altar. This is the offering. You must complete it by dusk. What's in it? Alessia asked, staring into the dark, crumbly mixture. Dust from the tiled chamber. Ashes of the dress worn by Eleonora. And her voice faltered. A part of you. Alessia stepped back. What do you mean? Her mother opened a tiny box and revealed a silver needle. Alessia's hand instinctively reached for her chest. No, her mother said gently. Just a drop of blood. Enough for the garden to recognize you. Tears pricked Alessia's eyes, but she held out her finger. The prick was swift. The blood, vivid red, fell into the soil like wine on snow. The ground beneath the altar shuddered, barely noticeable, like the earth had sighed. Then, the basil plants lining the garden walls began to move. Their stems twisted toward the bowl. Leaves turned. Within moments, the air pulsed with energy. The garden had awoken. From the corner of her eye, Alessia saw something shift in the shadows. A figure. Small. Watching. It was the girl from the mirror. Eleonora. She stood behind the fig tree, barefoot, hair wet as though she'd come from the rain. Her lips didn't move, but her eyes begged for something Alessia couldn't name. Forgiveness? Release? Or warning? Alessia took a step forward, but the girl vanished. Only the rustle of the leaves remained. Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's done." "No, it's not," Alessia said. "I saw her again." Her mother closed her eyes. "Then it means she's still waiting. And you must listen when she calls." The soil in the bowl had started to glow faintly, humming with unseen power. Her mother handed her the leaf-shaped key. "Tonight, return to the mirror room." Alessia clenched the key tightly. The garden was no longer silent. It whispered, leaves brushing together, basil breathing, names growing like vines in the air. And beneath it all, the feeling that Eleonora was nearer now. Not as a ghost, but as something else. Something waking. That night, the house felt alive. Floorboards murmured beneath Alessia's steps. The walls pulsed softly with warmth, like flesh under candlelight. Shadows stretched longer than they should have. And through the hallway, the faint scent of basil guided her back to the mirror room. She stood before the green door, the leaf-shaped key cold in her hand. It turned without resistance. The room welcomed her. Nothing had changed at first. The mirrors still lined the circular walls, dim and watchful. But this time, the reflections did not show her. They showed Eleonora. In every mirror, sometimes a toddler, sometimes a young woman, always wearing the dress. Alessia stepped forward, the key heavy in her palm. The center table had changed too. No longer empty. A small, carved music box sat atop it, closed. Ivory with golden trim. Faintly humming. She opened it. A lullaby spilled out, haunting and slow. She recognized the tune. Nana used to hum it when she was ill. A song with no lyrics, only a pattern of notes that made your throat tighten for no reason at all. Inside the box was a tiny figure. It wore the pink dress. It had no face. But as Alessia looked closer, the face began to form. Her eyes, her mouth, her brow furrowed in confusion. It was her. She gasped and dropped the lid. The lullaby stopped. The mirrors darkened. Then, slowly, the reflection in the mirror before her began to move on its own. Alessia stayed still, but the girl on the other side stepped forward. Eleonora again. Her expression calm, eyes no longer pleading, but knowing. She raised her hand and pointed downward. Alessia understood. The tile. The chamber. She turned to leave, but the room had changed. The door was gone. Only one mirror now reflected her true self, standing alone in the center of the room. All the others were her sister, watching, waiting. Then one spoke, not with lips, with thought. "You wore the dress. You fed the basil. You gave the blood. But you do not remember the promise." Alessia's throat tightened. What promise? The mirror behind her cracked. Not broken, split, like a seam being unstitched. Through it, she saw a new space. A hidden room behind the wall. Dark. Silent. But not empty. Drawn by instinct more than reason, Alessia stepped through the crack. The room was lined with children's shoes. Pairs, all perfectly placed. Dozens of them. Some polished, some old. In the center, a single cradle. Inside it, nothing. But carved into the wood were the words, "One lives. One guards." Her breath caught. "Why was I allowed to live?" she whispered. A voice answered, not Eleonora's, but her own. "Because you forgot." Suddenly, the shoes began to shift. The air turned bitter. The mirror behind her sealed. And from the cradle, a hand reached out. Tiny, pale. Alessia turned to run, but the room would not let her go. Not yet. Alessia couldn't move. The hand from the cradle didn't reach further. didn't grasp or threaten. It simply rested on the edge, impossibly still. Yet its presence filled the room like thunder. Her heartbeat became the only sound, louder with each passing second, until it too began to fade, drowned out by the whispering. It came from the shoes. Each pair murmured softly, as if the memories of those who wore them had awoken. Names began to rise from the floor, whispered into the walls, into Alessia's bones. Livia, Katerina, Fiona, Eleonora, and then Alessia. The cradle's wooden side now bore 2 lines of text. The second one hadn't been there before. One lives. One guards. One forgets. One remembers. She stepped closer. Against every instinct, against the cold threading through her spine. Inside the cradle now lay something new, a bundle wrapped in ancient lace, like a swaddled infant. No movement, no breath. But within the folds, she could see it wasn't made of flesh. It was a doll. Porcelain. Cracked. Its face her face. Its chest hollow. Carved where the heart should be. In the space inside, something pulsed. Green light. Like basil leaves underwater. Alessia reached out. As her fingers brushed the porcelain, the room shook. The shoes tumbled. The walls wailed. Mirrors behind the cradle began to shatter one by one, sending shards spiraling across the floor, but the doll remained untouched. Then came the footsteps. Soft. Bare. Deliberate. Someone else was in the room now. She turned. Her mother. But younger. Standing in the broken doorway of the mirror. Her voice was soft. Measured. "That's not your heart," she said. "It's hers." Alessia stepped back, the doll still in hand. "You lied to me," she said. Her mother, this younger version of her, nodded. "We all did. That's the cost of survival." "What is this place?" Alessia asked. Her mother didn't answer. She raised her hand and pointed toward the far wall, where the mirror had first opened. A new seam was forming. Behind it, stone steps. A corridor. A door, slightly open, revealing candlelight. "You must return it," her mother said, "or she'll never rest. And neither will you." Alessia turned the doll over. Her reflection danced in its porcelain face. And for a second, just a blink, she saw Eleonora again. Inside the glass. Smiling. The corridor behind the mirror was colder than the chamber of tiles. Older. Alessia descended the stone steps slowly, the porcelain doll cradled against her chest. The basil light inside it still pulsed, steady, like a second heartbeat. The key, warm now, swung from her wrist on a velvet ribbon. The passage twisted downward, carved directly into the bedrock beneath the palazzo. Candle sconces lined the walls, though none were lit. Still there was light. A greenish glow that seemed to seep from the very walls, as if the basil's roots ran through the stone itself. She reached the bottom. A single door. Unlike the others, this one was wooden and ancient, its grain warped with age. At its center, carved deep, the outline of a leaf. Alessia placed the key inside. It turned without force. The door opened inward with a hiss. The room was vast, far larger than anything could exist beneath the house. Its ceiling disappeared into shadow, but its walls were made of carved reliefs. Scenes of women in the pink dress, offering herbs, cradling dolls, placing items into earth. In the center, a basin. Stone. Wide. Filled with soil and something darker, denser. Memory. Her mother stood at the far end, though Alessia knew she hadn't walked in behind her. This woman was older now. Older than she had ever been. Her gray hair was braided down her back. Her eyes were distant. "You've brought her," she said. Alessia nodded. "She's been waiting." "For what?" Her mother didn't answer. Instead, she knelt beside the basin and gestured. Alessia stepped forward. "Place the doll in the soil," her mother said. Her hands trembled. "What happens after?" "Truth," the woman said softly. "And then choice." Alessia lowered the doll. The soil accepted it. Slowly, it sank until only the top of its porcelain head remained visible. The room went still. Then the walls came alive. The carved women began to move, no longer frozen in stone. Their gestures repeated like a silent ritual.
Pouring.
Planting. Bleeding. Holding. The basin began to glow. From its center, basil grew.
Fast.
Violently. A single stalk erupted from the soil, twisting into the shape of a girl. Her features bloomed like petals, first vague, then clear. Eleonora. Not the ghost. Not the memory. But something new. Something returned. She opened her eyes.
Green.
She looked at Alessia, not with accusation, but with understanding. Her lips didn't move, but her voice filled the space. You remembered. Alessia tried to speak. She couldn't. Eleonora turned to her mother. You kept the gate closed. I tried to protect her, the older woman said. But you knew it wouldn't last.
No.
Alessia stepped closer. Why me? Why this? Eleonora lifted her hand, and between her fingers, a second key, shaped like a heart. You still have a choice, she said.
Leave.
Forget.
Or stay.
And guard. The basil around her bloomed, releasing a scent so sweet it was almost suffocating. Alessia looked at the key in Eleonora's hand, then down at the basil growing through the floor. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She was ready. Alessia stood between the two women, her mother, time-worn and silent, and her sister, reborn in basil and light. The air inside the chamber pulsed, not with sound but with meaning. The soil at her feet felt warm.
Alive.
Eleonora extended the heart-shaped key once more. It's yours if you choose to remember everything, she said. Alessia hesitated. What happens if I turn it? Her mother answered this time. Then you become the next keeper. The house, the garden, the rituals, they become part of you. And if I don't, then the mirror closes. The cradle empties. And the basil dies. She looked at Eleonora, who waited without pleading. Not pressuring, not begging, only present.
Whole.
Watching. The reflections of the past had led her here. The pink dress, the garden's whisper, the doll in the cradle. All signs. All rituals.
But now, choice.
She reached for the key. It was light. Too light. As if it weighed nothing. But the moment her fingers closed around it, the chamber shifted. The ceiling vanished into starlight. The soil receded, and beneath it, Alessia saw them. Rows upon rows of other sisters. Other women. Each wearing the dress. Each watching from somewhere just beneath the surface. Not trapped. Guarding. Eleonora stepped back and knelt beside the basin. She placed her hand into the soil. Instantly, a vine grew from beneath her palm, wrapping around her wrist like a bracelet. I was the last memory, she said. You will be the first. Alessia looked to her mother, who was crying now, but not in grief. Something softer. You always were the stronger one, she whispered. Alessia closed her eyes and turned the heart-shaped key. There was no click. No noise. Only change. The dress on her body deepened in color, from a soft pink to something ancient. Ceremonial. The basil in the walls receded, curling inward as if bowing. The ground below the basin opened slightly, revealing a hollow space. The doll was gone. In its place, a seed.
Shining.
Silver-veined. Alessia stepped forward, took the seed, and pressed it to her chest. It dissolved into her. And the moment it did, she remembered everything. Every voice the house had ever held. Every name in the tiles. Every offering made. The sisters were not buried here. They were planted. And now, she was the soil. When Alessia opened her eyes again, she was back in her bedroom. The mirror was gone. The dress hung neatly in her wardrobe, no longer pulsing with unseen weight. The scent of basil had softened, no longer suffocating, now gentle, familiar. The kind that lingered in kitchens after a summer meal. But something was different. The silence. It wasn't empty. It was listening. She stood, barefoot, and walked through the house. Down the stairs. Through the corridors. Every room seemed to tilt slightly toward her presence, as though the walls were turning their heads. The portraits looked clearer now. Less faded. The eyes no longer blank. She passed the grandfather clock.
Stopped.
It was ticking again, but not in time with the hands. The sound matched her heartbeat.
Alive.
Steady. The door to the tiled chamber had vanished, but the memory of it remained. A warmth beneath her soles, a whisper in her ear. We remember, because you do. She found her mother in the garden. Older again, face lined with rest. The altar was bare, the basin filled with new soil. Her mother smiled softly. You look like her now. Alessia said nothing. She didn't need to. The vines in the garden had already begun to reach toward her ankles, brushing her skin with affection. The plants knew. She walked to the center and stood above the roots. Above the cradle, far below. The wind rustled through the basil. It wasn't words, not exactly. But she understood. She knelt and pressed her palm to the earth. From beneath her hand, a new stem broke the surface.
Fast. Certain.
A single leaf unfurled.
Small. Bright. Green.
The garden sighed. She was part of it now. Not just a daughter. Not just a sister. A guardian. A vessel. A mirror. From somewhere behind the ivy, a giggle echoed. Light, playful. She turned. There, for the last time, stood Eleonora. Still wearing the pink dress. Still smiling. But fading now, gently, like dusk. She placed a finger to her lips. And disappeared into the leaves. The house exhaled. And Alessia, the first of the next, stood tall as the basil rose.